Hey everyone, welcome back to the Buying Sucks podcast. I'm your host, Bryant, and I got Joe here.
That's right. And today we've got Evan Connolly joining us. This is going to be a good episode. So, Evan's got over 2 decades of procurement experience focused on marketing, innovation, IT spend, and building a strategy behind searching technology, building it into your business, and building a real partnership with those vendors. We'll talk a little bit through how he saved millions of dollars by taking really complex negotiations and turning it into real strategic wins. And if you're on a marketing team where you don't have someone in procurement, this is a great listen to understand what tactics you can use to win on your own.
Now, this episode is a little bit different. You've heard us talk about suppliers and the types of technology they use, talk about internal politics and why buying sucks. And really, our goal with bringing Evan on was to learn from his expertise around, hey, why and how can you avoid pitfalls of buying and how can you harden your process internally? We know that not everyone works at companies that have large procurement and sourcing functions. Heck, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know what these are. And it's really important as we get into it just to kind of have the baseline, right? So procurement functions normally come towards the end of the cycle. You might even hear Evan talk about, hey, the business stakeholders got to figure out all their requirements. They need to get clarity. And that's because procurement does come in later in the cycle. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't learn some amazing stuff. What we really found out as we went through this episode is that there are things you can do early to make the rest of your life much easier. So whether you're in an organization with a procurement and sourcing arm or you're in a small organization, there's a lot of value in this conversation end to end. And with that, we'll see you in the episode. See you there.
See you in.
All right, everyone. Well, it's another episode of the Buying Sucks podcast. We have our first guest. Evan, thank you for coming through the gauntlet and joining us for what hopefully is an amazing conversation.
You guys, thank you.
So just a little bit of context. Joe and I have been, thinking about the buying process and all the different pieces. And if you've listened to our previous episodes, we're rather harsh on vendors. We're rather harsh on all the different pieces. And we thought it might be nice to kind of take a different approach and talk to someone that's deep in the kind of morass of it in large organizations, trying to help people, buy more effectively and go through this process more smoothly.
That's right. And I think this hurts me as a marketer. Evan, we're going to dive into some of your stories, but the amount of times that I have bought software that the company was already using from a pretty similar vendor and we're double spending, or the amount of times where I've done some pretty rookie moves that after learning from you, I should not be involved in a negotiation process. So this is going to be a good conversation.
Well, I think we, when we were prepping, I called marketers little baby ducklings that we had to save and protect.
That's right.
So Evan, let's jump into it. I think, we're really focused on the earlier stages of the sales cycle. I know that you see things kind of soup to nuts in your previous roles. Maybe start us off. Where do you think is like the most important part of a discussion with the vendor? How do you kind of initiate a well-run buying campaign with somebody?
So it's a really interesting space. And I think that a lot of marketers, especially, aren't aware of a whole separate procurement department and feel like they need to take it upon themselves. And or if a company doesn't have procurement, they're not there yet, something like that. It can feel like there's just, you don't know where to start, right? So simple first. And what I mean by that is the number one problem that I see most teams make is that there are too many cooks in the kitchen. And when that happens, everything automatically shifts over to the vendor having all of the leverage, because whatever conversations they have with your end users, stakeholders, whomever, they're going to try to get as much information out of them separately as they can.
Yeah.
So who's the core team? Like, you say too many people. Like
number one.
Yeah, like who is like that like ideal team where you're just like you don't want to bring too many people, you want to be focused, you want to keep things on track. Like who do you think people should bring with them in these processes?
Yeah, so that's an interesting point, because in one aspect you're spot on. You don't want to bring too many people in, while at the same point you want to make sure that whatever you're buying, not only the end users or stakeholders are going to be happy and it'll fulfill everything they need if they're different departments coming together, something like that. But there can absolutely be too many people in there where all of a sudden now when you get down to scoring, deciding all that, it just muddies the waters that much more. So creating a RACI is really the first thing you should do when looking at, hey, I got this project. We need to outsource. We need to look at vendors. What do we need? And the first thing is, who needs to be involved? Who needs to be responsible? Who's taking the actionable items? Who do you need to consult? So, for example, IT, legal, finance, any of those. And those can be also in just internal meetings. They don't actually need to ever talk to the vendor. All depends. But you need to make sure that you drill those down. And that obviously, at the end of the day, you need to make sure you know who the final decision maker is, who will clear saying, yes, this will do everything we need. And yes, I'm okay paying that much.
Evan, I love this because as a marketer, I have gone into situations where theoretically I'm buying a scooter and I come out with a minivan and I'm like, whoa, that was very different. And you realize, just like your point, the beauty of a RACI, even though most of us are like, do I really have to think this through? Is that you understand what you're truly looking for. And I have seen that scope creep where I thought I was looking for something else and all of a sudden everyone else got involved and we got something really unwieldy and it didn't work out. So I love hearing that.
Yeah, you need one, and it's truly, it also helps with not only making sure that you have clear, concise goal. I mean, you're going out to a vendor because you have a problem to solve, right? So you're already probably defined that problem. You need to know what's out there that can solve for that problem, but you also need the vendor to, they think they're selling themselves. What you need to extract out of them is how will they solve your problem and what else can they provide you, right? So it's not, you always want to make up a must-have list and a nice-to-have list because vendors always want you to have the whole package. They don't want you just using a piece of what they offer. They are going to offer you A to Z, saying this is what we do, this is who we are. Even though you're concentrated on that one little piece, and now all of a sudden that 1 hour presentation that they have to provide how they're going to solve your problem goes into all these crazy things, that they're doing, and it's just not to the right. But then, of course, just like you're saying, you may have someone in there that on the IT side, let's say, really excited about it, has another thought for another project. Now, all of a sudden, your project isn't their priority because they have something else going on. So really having that one source of information, making sure things go in the order you want them to go in, first and foremost, and getting the information that you want. It's how are you going to solve for my problem first?
I love what you're talking about on coming in with a strong point of view. I think, at least between Joe and I, we're very passionate about this idea of understanding deeply what you need because you're walking into a conversation where they look like they have their own agenda. They're incentivized differently. And we all fall for it. Like I've definitely walked past the thing and been like,
that was our job. I mean, Evan, it's painful. Brian, I promise I'm not going to cut you off on this, but it is painful hearing what you're saying because that's what Bryant and I are on the other side. We're in internal huddles going, have we reminded them of our full value, right? You're going, why are you even looking at this vendor? And there is this push and pull of everything we want to pull you into, and you've got the push of the problem you're just trying to solve in the first place.
Yes. Yeah, I can't tell you, I've owned or bought or drove a few cars. I have bought and purchased for other people. I don't know how many other cars. It's certainly one of those things that once you understand what information you need, what information you want to keep to yourself until the right time, because timing is everything when it comes to speaking with vendors, making sure that they're first and foremost, you need to identify the problem and who can solve it. The vendor needs to sell you on that problem, but they also need to make sure that they're doing it efficiently and explaining to you how they're going to do it without giving away that black box solution that they provide. most of the time. There's
Yeah.
obviously they're providing some kind of extra piece that you can't do on your own, and that's why you're going to them.
Yeah.
But they don't need your internal strategies or budget to know that, or to be able to tell you how much they would charge for it.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting point on I think this thing that we talk when we talk to folks, to buyers, is they're not sure, like they don't want to give up their hand too early, right? So they go into these early sales meetings and they're like, just like, show me the deck, give me the demo, and I'll let you know. Which, in my opinion, and this is my opinion from a selling side, is that's like a kind of a destructive thing, right? People that don't share means that your second meeting is going to be equally inefficient and ineffective. And I think there's this fine line. I'd love to hear what you think, what your opinion is on what is the right thing to share, the right amount. Because sometimes people, because buying is an infrequent activity, they don't know what they should do, or I mean, maybe they just are afraid of messing up. So, what do you think constitutes as fair game? You're trying to partner, you're trying to share enough, like, and what is like, we need to keep it close to the chest because that's going to give us the best opportunity for the best deal, for example.
Yeah, so that's a fine line, right? And by no means when I say keeping from, you want to be incredibly transparent, because if you're not, at the end of the day, they're going in blind, right? They're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
come in and say, okay, guys, we told you what you can do, but what's your real problem, right? So
Yeah.
fully understand that. And what I would say there is, first and foremost, is NDA, 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 NDA.
Okay.
The reason I say NDA first is because a 30-minute conversation exploring the vendor can all of a sudden be, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that you did branding. We're launching a product in 2 months and we don't know what kind of labeling or bottling we're going to be doing. I just gave away something that isn't common knowledge, isn't public knowledge. NDA, right? So
Okay.
anything can happen in a very simple conversation, and every company has a boilerplate NDA. Very simple. It's not something that will take weeks or anything like that. It's simply, hey guys, we want to talk to you. We want to be able to share information. You want to be able to share information with us because you want to tell us how you can solve for our problem. So it's in our best interest, right?
Yeah.
So NDA number one. So that way it goes to your point. You don't want to mess up. You can't mess up. There is nothing you can do. You can mess up a deal, let's say, in sense of you may pay an extra 5% for something, 10% for something, whatever it is, but you're not going to do anything that is going to hurt the company. And that's first and foremost, is making sure that you're following company policy, company governance. You think for example, the digital marketing realm,
Yeah.
look at the governance there, right?
Oh
And
my
how
gosh.
important that is.
Yeah.
If it's not on the paper, the contract, there's a problem right there, right? So you want to make sure that everything is within NDA. That way you can't mess up.
Evan, just to replay that back to because I love this point. There's this line that, especially with marketers, they're more afraid of messing up than they are missing out. So when we buy stuff, we buy out of fear. And I love your point. It's sign an NDA so that you can say, this is what's important to me. I want to bring you into my real problem so that you can help me design a solution.
Yeah.
And I think you're getting this next. It's like, well, then we've got to identify, if you know all these intimate things, then you understand why certain features or items are weighted really heavily in my decision process.
Yep, absolutely. Then hopefully that also kind of further explains you're not keeping things from them. You're not being transparent with them. What you're not doing is saying, hey, I have $500,000 to spend. Can you do this?
Yeah.
So what are the big no-nos?
I guarantee you they can do it for $500,000. I also guarantee you they do it for $350,000.
I mean, they're software businesses with margins. We all like. I think that's the thing that, especially when you're like new in your career and you just like buy things. You look at the sticker price, and you probably have always paid sticker price for things. It's just different in a B2B selling motion, and I actually don't think most people know that, right? Or they're
Yeah.
uncomfortable with the negotiation. Joe, I mean, like if Joe were to pan his camera it'd be just a room of things that he like, didn't negotiate on. Just a
It is
sea of.
bad. I will tell you, Evan, I think one of the reasons why we're so excited, and I promise I'll cut this short because I want to hear your side, is especially if you're a new first-time manager, a lot of millennials, definitely Gen Z, are very afraid of negotiating. It's stamped
Mm.
out of their world. And so I think hearing your perspective is just like, whoa, there's a whole world I didn't know of.
By a raise of hands, who's comfortable with silence?
I am so bad. If you put me in an Uber, I will tell my life story within about a minute and a half.
I'm passed out.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you.
So, and I know that this is really kind of a big topic of, well, what are some tips? Well, how do you negotiate
Yeah.
I don't understand how you get something from X to Y. All those. The first thing I would say is silence is golden,
Okay.
because vendors are afraid of silence. And for example, the first thing you should do always, if someone is giving you a proposal over, Teams meeting, something like this, big presentation, it comes to the final of saying, hey, here's the price for it. Silence. Maybe a little surprise face.
Oh, I like that.
You will not believe what comes out next from that person, team, whoever, because they need to fill the air. They need to fill the gap. Because guess what? Those people across from you, the people who were selling you that, are also Gen Z, millennials,
And they're
people,
uncomfortable.
individuals.
Oh.
They aren't necessarily negotiators for a living either.
Yeah.
So they want the deal. They want to get it done. They want to work with you, and they want to grow within your business. So knowing, those aspects of what the vendor is looking to do, how can you dangle that fish? How can you make that something where not only you really want to work with them, but now they're coming to the table saying, hey guys, we don't necessarily just want to treat you as a client. We want you as a partner. And
Yeah.
that's what I personally try to do in the larger supplier relationship management level of companies that you work with when there's a large amount of spend or high complexity, where you're really working together with that vendor to solve for your problem. That way they're more invested. They want to see it succeed more so than just a regular client. And the advantage of a procurement person or someone who is leading that project or what have you is they can take the confrontation piece or the difficult conversations with vendors if things aren't going great or anything like that. The procurement person can take that away from the marketers, so they always have a positive experience with the vendors, and the procurement team can actually have those both positive and not negative but constructive conversations with those vendors, so that way the marketing teams don't, or any other teams don't have to worry about that. And it's just day in the life. There they go.
Let's keep picking on marketing. I'm getting so much glee out of this. And I'm sure your coworkers are like, marketing, that was me.
There's a lot, right? There,
Yeah.
and that's kind of why I don't pick on marketing, but there's just a lot. And marketing positions move around naturally just a lot more than, let's say, an IT position. Obviously,
very much.
move up in the ranks, do what you do, but marketers can go anywhere from, this side of modeling, whatever is creative stuff like that, all the way to a different, digital, dealing different vendors all together. Where IT, it's usually.
Yeah, I think it's the speculative value. It's hard, right? These things are hard to measure with marketing tools sometimes. And then when you look at an IT spend, you're like, yeah, it's Windows. It turns on. It better run 64 and 32-bit software. Go away. And that leads me to another one of the things I wanted to ask you is around aligning on are we trying to solve for? I feel like inside of this space, right? Whether it's marketing software, whether it's AI, XYZ software, in the contact center where I'm from, it's, hey, what are these specific capabilities for containment and how do we drive the right flows and how many flows do we get? Whatever the minutia might be. I have personally on the other side have seen companies that are like, hey, let's go very specific. Let's get every I dotted, every T crossed. And then I've seen other companies that I've been at that are like, keep it as open as possible, de-risk. whatever it takes to get the deal done. And I'm just curious your take on this, Evan, on what is like the right, altitude to like get agreement and alignment where you're protecting yourself and the stuff that you need to get done, as a business stakeholder versus getting the right deal, making sure that you're pushing things forward in a productive way. I'm curious what your take is on that.
So, from my understanding, it's first and foremost you're talking about the what are we trying to solve for, and putting those together. That is the responsibility of the stakeholder because they're responsible for the success
Yep.
of getting to those KPIs. Whatever, in order to do that, you first need to identify, obviously, the problem, what might be behind those problems, whether it be things like policies, regulations, all those things. Get to what you want it to look like or what capabilities you want all of a sudden to have introduced. Let's say, for example, it's a simple signature software or approval software that just helps you route for the correct approvals, right? It's how would they be able to automate that process in the sense of, do you have things already internally that you need to deal with? You need to lay those out first. And then from there, it's what in addition must I have in order to reach my goals for the end of the year or strategy, what have you. Defining those clearly and then putting together some kind of weighted playbook that has descriptive KPIs that would get you to your end goal. You want to be able to define those before you talk to any vendors. And I'm not saying talking to any vendors whatsoever at all, just before an RFP goes out or before can I get pricing for? Because if you don't define those clearly beforehand, then now all of a sudden when something comes back, those will be completely altered with bias. And that's the additional piece that procurement can bring is that unbiased for you. I personally don't care if you go with vendor X, Y, or Z. I don't care if you choose the cheapest option. I care that you choose the best option that is going to allow you to succeed. Procurement's job is to get the best price for, and obviously a whole lot more than that, right? So contracts, all that. But the best price with what you want to move forward with. Yeah, an old mentor of mine, Bob, if you're out there, hello. He told me, and it always stuck with me, we're like the news. I report, you decide. And it really does ring true. The minute a procurement person puts in their bias on who to go with, a lot of things get skewed. So having that unbiased piece, knowing that everything will be down the line. For example, when running an RFP, there should be a time for questions and answers to the vendor to send, right? To the stakeholder. How many times have you gotten the answers back along with all the other questions that they were asked from the other vendors?
I just want to say
100%.
Yes. And this is such a good thing to underline because even just to catch, I will say from my experiences of where I've messed up here, you already pointed out something I think most marketers do that's really bad. We call it, what's the best? And so we reach out to our friends and we go, hey, what's the best software for this? And then we go, I don't really know what I'm looking for yet. So we take a few meetings and those first meetings skew and they drift us away from why we started. I hear you, your order of operations.
Into this solution.
Yeah, your order of operations, the weighting you're talking about, they're all these things that people go, oh yeah, that makes sense, but then no one does it. And in reality, you find yourself in the vacuum of the distortion field that a really good vendor with a great sales team has brought you in on. This is really helpful, just hearing your
It was amazing.
And think of that real quick, right? So now you get down to the 1 yard line. You're really excited.
Yeah.
Somebody forgot the ball, right? Everything from the very beginning has now been skewed to a point where it's much harder to answer the question from higher ups, leadership, executives of Why did you choose this vendor? And who else and what else did you look at?
Yeah.
And or going through contracting, all of a sudden realizing that there is a big obstacle in front of you that they simply can't do and your company needs them to, right? So for example,
wow.
data protection agreement, if it's a global, or insurance, simple insurance, right? A lot of companies require $2 million minimum on for insurance. Smaller companies, startups, when I was working in the innovation IoT space, a lot of startups, you needed to go through that hurdle. And if you haven't done it, right, iteratively over and over and really figured that piece out, now every single person is trying to figure out how to get around this obstacle in 100 different ways.
Yeah.
And it really muddies the waters of
Yeah.
overall company spend. You really got to think of it as, yes, you are spending this money. How much more of the company's money is going out every day? And is it a vendor that is already there?
Yeah.
Is it, a vendor that has been used by the company, let's say 3 to 5 years ago, and a big blow up happened and they delisted them and said, never again.
Yeah.
Those simple things, making sure that just the whole process becomes easier.
Yeah.
So that way, when you do get to that 5 yard line, 1 yard line, it's a simple little scoot instead of having to start the process all over again.
I love that. I think that's a great way to kind of pull it all together. Is from where I sit, a lot of these like early fundamental things are incredibly important because you can't you can't take salt away from a dish, right? Like the moment you throw it in there, like you're committed. And I think there's a lot of that happens in just like the art of communicating with vendors, how you're building up your kind of explanation of why you want it. Something that I see happen all the time is that people like get to the point where they've made a selection and then they forget why they chose them, to your point. And then when they're pushed and they're like, hey, why? You're like, oh crap. And suddenly like they work for them because they've been like blinded by all the
Deck.
the
they're
stuff.
play the
And
pitch deck
so you just got to be really careful, right? As we talk to folks, to people that are listening to this, maybe you don't have an Evan that's guiding you, and you just have to understand that while people that are selling you software like do want to help you, they
Yes.
also like to make money. They also have their own agenda. Evan, I thought I'd close it, and you feel free to decline to answer. But what is like the craziest 11th hour thing that you've seen happen that you're just like, are they really trying to pull this on us? Like, are they really trying to pull a fast one? I'm just curious if you have any funny stories you could share there.
Let's see, man. I have a lot of crazy stories. So a few years ago, there was a $7 to $10 million deal that I was working on, and it was for IT. Very last minute, they added a line to the final quote or final contract. Actually, it wasn't in the quote. Final contract for a 3-year agreement stating that we were responsible for maintenance of their systems every year, and I think it was for 8% of the total yearly.
Pretty heavy line to add in there.
That's just 8%.
Yeah, it was just one of those things. As much as as odd as it is, I kind of knew it was coming only because I've done this for almost 20 years now. Sitting down, talking with someone for 5 minutes, I can tell whether or not a curveball's coming, really. And it could be a month later, and I could say, I told you, here it is. So it went away very easily.
Yeah.
But to your point, do people want to jump and have those conversations and negotiate it away? And on top of that, for annoying me, give me an extra 3%. Being able to do that and having those conversations calmly and making sure that at the end of the day, the stakeholders are happy and the vendor is excited to get into the door.
Yeah.
To work with you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point, right? The partnership is the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of that.
Yeah.
Last minute line of, here's your total price, and then at the very end it's plus
30% tax, Well, with that, I won't ask you to clock Joe on what version of salesperson he is, but this has been amazing,
Oh, it'd
Evan.
be a fun one.
Evan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I think there's just so much that goes into the like kind of the thought process around what to do early, and you've shed a lot of light on that. And I think
Yeah.
hopefully everyone here got a bit of a view into what it takes to really push things through that cycle.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you. It's a big topic. There's a lot to it. Any other things you got, please let me know.
Cheers.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you
Thanks,
then.
everyone.